Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. A story of the Annabelle doll. Donna's mother gave her a beautiful antique doll as a birthday present. Donna was so pleased and wanted to show it to her friend Angie right away. "Look, Angie, how sweet the doll is. My mommy gave it to me. I love dolls. So much I'm crazy about dolls since childhood. My mother knows very well what I like. It's really cute. It's so lifelike, it seems like it could just speak to us. So beautiful that night." Donna played with her doll for a while and put it on the bed. In the morning, she left the house to go for breakfast with Angie. But alone in the house, the doll's black eyes turned red, and there was a terrifying glow in them. The room seemed to shake with terrifying sounds. And sometime when both the friends came back to Donna's room, they were shocked. The doll was sitting in the chair and not on the bed, and both of her eyes had turned red. This scene was very astonishing and frightening. "Hey, I put it on the bed. How did it go on that chair? Did you pick it up?" "No, we're the only ones in the house. Nobody else here to come into this room." "So how did the doll move? How's that possible?" Both friends stared at the doll, and suddenly a creepy sound echoed through the house. Very often after that day, some surprising events happened with that doll. There used to be creepy sounds that made the heart shiver. Sometimes Donna would find the doll under the bed or standing in front of her door. All these unpleasant incidences added to the doll's mysterious movements, music. Sometimes there were loud laughing sounds, like a girl laughing loudly and furiously, and sometimes the crying sounds of a child also came out of the mouth of the same doll. These all incidences were very bewildering. Both friends were often scared due to sheer fear. Because really, what's more scary than fear? One day when Donna came to her room with her friend, she saw that many of her books were scattered. Many pieces of paper were spread in the house, and they had help written on them. The paper started flying around with a scary voice that day. Donna looked at doll carefully and noticed that tears of blood were falling from the doll's eyes. They were both very nervous. They hugged each other in fear and quickly called a paranormal expert. See, the soul of a 7-year-old was trapped inside this doll. The girl's name was Annabelle Higgins, who died in an accident. This girl's soul is hungry for love. It has become fond of you now. It is your decision whether to live with her. Music. We will always keep her with us. This doll has never done us any harm. This is a very cute doll now. We too have become very attached to her. A few days later, a friend of theirs named Lou came to live in their apartment. He lived in a separate room. Lou looked at Annabelle doll very carefully. Then he saw some strange movements in the door. "Donna, you've got to remove this from here, or someday an accident, a terrible thing will happen to you." "Lou, there is no such thing. We've been living with Annabelle for a long time. We love her and she loves us. I don't see any harm in it." The girls had no idea how right Lou really was and disregarded his warning. That was their biggest mistake. One day Lou was sleeping alone in his room. Terrible voices started moving towards him. A deceiving laugh was getting more and more terrible on the verge of the moment. He saw Annabelle recklessly approaching him while flying in the air. She was hovering over him. Her face looked horrific. Her eyes were glowing and glittering red. There was blood on the edges of her lips. Before he knew it, she scratched his chest with her claws. Lou's chest started hurting very badly. "Help, help, save me from this doll." Terrible voices were coming. He felt as if someone was stabbing him on his chest. Terrible laughter echoed across the room. Lou could not even move from his place, like someone had grabbed him and held him down. Terrible screeching sounds were coming from everywhere. He was horrified. He was terrified. He was petrified. His clothes were torn. He could not even speak properly. And in the next instant, he fainted when his eyes opened again. He was groaning in pain. There were 4 deep nail marks on his chest. He was badly injured. Donna and her friend found him and were shocked. They both looked quite scared. They could not understand what to do. Donna sat holding her head when their neighbors heard of what had happened. People called Father Hagen. He investigates Annabella, and soon he understands that taming the doll is not within his power. Music. He called a very high-ranking priest named Father Cook. He contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren together. These people began to study Annabelle doll in depth. Now every layer of truth was beginning to be revealed. Ed and Lorraine Warren had never seen such a dangerous and mysterious doll in their life. After much research, they finally found out the truth about that doll. They found that inside that doll was not the soul of a 7-year-old girl, but rather the soul of a big dreadful devil who was pretending to be a child. Music, the main objective of that devil, was to have complete control over the body of Donna or her friend Angie. If he had succeeded in his goal, he could have caused great destruction forever. When Ed and Lorraine Warren revealed this truth to them, the ground shook under Donna's feet. She was shivering in fear. "Sir, I am very scared. Please save me from this dangerous doll. Take her from here. She can become fatal for anyone at any time. Do not worry, my child. I will take her away from here forever. After this, you will not be in any danger." Then Ed and Lorraine Warren put the doll in the trunk of their car and left. But as soon as they started to move their car forward, their car moved faster and faster, and the steering was locked and the brakes wouldn't work. Strange sounds came from the trunk. They leapt from the speeding car just as it crashed into a tree. Ed and Lorraine Warren fought a lot, and then took holy water and sprinkled it on that Annabelle doll. Then the doll calmed down. They started the car and reached their home. Now they knew it was not easy to control the doll at Ed and Lorraine Warren's house there. The doll also moved from one place to another, so they called Jason Bradford, another famous Catholic priest. Jason showed the influence of his powers and raised the doll in his hand and said, "Music, you are a simple doll. You will not harm anyone." After saying this, he left for his home from there, and after some time news came that he nearly died in a terrible accident now. With priests Jason and Ed and Lorraine Warren deciding together, the Annabelle doll was locked in a wooden box. They kept that box in the museum. Even today, the doll is kept in the museum in the same wooden box. Once a friend of Ed and Lorraine Warren made fun of Annabelle doll. While discussing her after this, he was going on a motorcycle with his wife and they had a terrible accident and died. Now people are so afraid to say the name Annabella to this date. Annabella is locked inside that wooden box in the museum. Nobody has dared to see her even today. Annabella is considered the world's most dangerous, cursed doll. The end. U-Store. This series of events took place in 1970. It all began when a woman from Connecticut bought an old rag doll as a gift for her daughter. Donna, who was attending college at the time, was happy about the gift because it reminded her of her childhood. She kept the doll on her bed, in the room she shared with her friend Angie at the student dormitories. After some time, the two friends began to notice something strange about the doll. Apparently, the doll seemed to be able to move. Its changes in position were imperceptible at first, only tiny movements of the head or legs. But they found that the doll had changed positions by itself. Eventually, it started winding up in different spots than where they had left it. At first, they thought it was a joke from the other students, so they decided to put the doll in the living room, but every day, they found it back on the bed. And then some messages began, written in what looked like a child handwriting on scraps of paper. These messages said one thing: "Help me." Given these inexplicable events, they decided to call a paranormal expert. As soon as the psychic touched the doll, he understood exactly what was happening in that house. The doll was possessed by the spirit of Annabelle Higgins, a little girl who died at the age of 7 on the very ground where the student residence hall was later built. She also said that the spirit was not evil or dangerous, but that it was only seeking attention from the two girls. After knowing that story, Donna and Angie didn't want to get rid of the doll, feeling pity for the spirit, and they named it Annabelle. Angie's boyfriend Lou, who often stayed in that apartment, wasn't really fond of the doll, and he insisted that was better to throw the doll away for good, but Annabelle remained in the house. In the days that followed, it was now Lou who was involved in some disturbing events. During the night, he felt like he was suffocating and swore that he saw the doll trying to strangle him in his sleep. A few days later, Lou woke up screaming in pain with cuts all over his arm while he was sleeping alone in his room. At that point, the girls realized that they were not dealing with the spirit of a little girl. What they were actually dealing with was a demon. They called Edward and Lorraine Warren, two well-known paranormal investigators and demonologists, who took the doll away. The doll was later classified as a demon-possessed object and was placed in a glass case at the Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, where it is still located to this day. There is a very strict rule about it. In order to not awaken the spirit, no one is allowed to be too friendly with Annabelle, and you must not stare into the doll's eyes for too long, or the worst could happen to you. When a young woman receives a birthday gift of a doll from her mother, she is first elated, believing it to make a wonderful companion. But when the doll begins to move on its own, it soon reveals its malevolent nature. It will take the expertise of renowned demonologist and priest to help free them from the entity that now infests their lives. Will they make it out alive before it's too late? This is the untold story of Annabelle, the demonic doll of Connecticut. And this story just may make you think twice about your keepsakes. Our story begins in 1970. 25-year-old Deirdre Barnard has recently moved into her first apartment with her two friends, an engaged couple named Laura Clifton and Carol Randall. Her mother had bought her a gift for her birthday and hoped that it would keep her daughter's spirits up and spread joy to her new home as she pursued her education and nursing. Deirdre loved the gift, finding its rosy red cheeks with hair too matched to be a fun companion for her new journey in life. Shortly after admiring her new doll, she placed it on her bed with its arms and legs out. For the next several days, it became routine for Deirdre to come home from her studies, spend time with the doll, and then place her back in the exact same position with its arms and legs out on her bed. Oddly, however, after the first several days of this new routine, the young woman began to notice that something wasn't quite right. Every morning she would lay her doll back on her bed before heading to school, with its arms and legs stretched out. Yet every night upon her return she would find the doll in different positions. Sometimes the doll's legs would be crossed and other times its arms. And as the days went on, it would even start to be seen in different parts of her room, oftentimes with its arms pointed outward. But Deirdre's room would not be its only occupied space. The doll would begin to be found in various positions all over the apartment, and Deirdre wasn't the only person who was witnessing these bizarre manifestations. Her two roommates would seem to bear witness to them as well. One evening, Deirdre returned home with her roommate Laura, who was also a trainee nurse at the time, and her fiancé Cal. Upon opening the door to their apartment, they would find the doll kneeling before them in a chair, facing the door, as if it had been waiting for them to return. This not only scared everyone, but especially Deirdre, because she knew for a fact that as per her routine, as she had placed the doll on her bed. That very morning, it had inexplicably moved on its own to try and make sense of all this. They moved the doll and then tried to reposition it back into its original kneeling stance, the same one they had seen when initially walking through the door. But each time they tried to replicate the position due to the design of the doll, this proved impossible. The movement of the doll, as well as its position, now left the trio at a loss for words. The only conclusion they could draw from the situation was that some kind of force was manipulating the doll. Deirdre would place the doll back in its normal position on her bed for the night, but this experience would be far from the last for all of them. Just several days following the previously mentioned happening, a new phenomenon began to manifest. Little notes written in pencil on parchment paper began to be found randomly throughout the apartment and at random times. The messages included such phrases as, "Help us" or "Help Carl." But despite the messages, urgent requests for help, no one was able to figure out just what they were referring to because none of them were experiencing an urgent situation, including Carl. And weirder still, none of them kept parchment paper or pencils. This realization just further deepened the mystery that was now unfolding before their very eyes. At first, they believed that possibly someone was breaking into their apartment to play pranks on them. So in order to check if this indeed was the case, Deirdre and Laura began leaving marks around the windows and doors, marks that, if disturbed, would show later on. They also rearranged their furniture in an effort to ensure that if anyone was entering their apartment unannounced, that they would leave a trace. But again, later that night, upon their return from their studies, none of the furniture had been disturbed, nor had any of their marks yet. The doll had moved rooms, frightened and perplexed at this point. The trio tried to come up with some potential solutions, but as they individually gave them thought, day in and day out, the doll would continue to move on its own accord, positions, and places. One day the three would return yet again as per their routine. to find the doll yet again in another part of the apartment. But this time there was something different. This time they found it sat with some kind of liquid on its hands. Upon a closer look, they were even more frightened because the liquid appeared to be blood. And this blood was all over the doll's hands, as well as 3 distinct dots of blood were also on its chest. Terrified, the 3 sat in the living room and tried to figure out some kind of game plan on how to handle the paranormal situation they found themselves in. Deidre would grab a phone book from the cupboard and began flicking through the pages as the group talked. One of her fingers would finally rest on a psychic medium's number during the brief call. They would explain that they had been experiencing ghostly-type activity within their apartment, but they did not inform her about the doll specifically. She would arrive the following day to see what she could do to help. As she walked through the apartment, she began to explain to Laura and Deirdre about the spirit she felt had inhabited the building. The ladies would eventually make their way to Deirdre's room, where the doll currently sat. They asked what the medium felt in regards to the doll. Upon examining it, she said she felt a strong presence surrounding the object, but informed the 2 that she would need to conduct a science around it in order to discover more information. So a sales was agreed to. As the ritual was conducted around the doll, the medium began to divulge information to Laura and Deirdre. She claimed that she had channeled the spirit of a 7-year-old little girl named Annabelle Higgins. She said that Annabelle used to play in the area long before the houses and apartment buildings were there, back when all that existed were fields. Many innocent and happy hours were passed here until suddenly they ended. Annabelle was confused as to what had happened to her, to which the medium interpreted to be her death. And since her death, the child had wandered the place she was the happiest, the fields. Once the apartments were built upon them, the halls quickly became a lonely place for her to haunt with the lifestyles of most modern people, requiring work most of the time. This meant that Annabelle had no one to play with. But then one day, 2 young women brought with them a playful-looking doll. Finally, she had something to play with again. And more so, she had the comfort of 2 young women who she believed would be more empathetic and accepting of her and would allow her to play with them through the vessel of the medium. Annabelle would ask if she could live in the doll and be with Deirdre and Laura, touched by the young girl's story. The 2 women agreed, and following the sales, they would name the doll Annabelle and the young on her. A truly nice gesture from the 2 of them. However, upon agreeing to have Annabelle inhabit the doll and stay with them is when the haunting truly began. Convinced now that they were sharing a space with Annabelle, they began to treat the doll as a living, breathing person. It was no longer a lifeless toy, but the young and lonely little girl, regardless of the 2 ladies' compassion. Carl was not so convinced. He sensed that something was very off in regards to this entire situation and believed that no good would come of it. He thought the doll could possibly be some kind of trickster or a conduit that disguised its true intentions. And in time, perhaps he was right. In the weeks following the seance, Carl began to feel ill at most times of the day, with no rational origin. And at night, every night, he began to have horrible nightmares. These experiences culminated with Carl waking up one night to find Annabelle gliding over his body before he could react. The doll's hands were on either side of his neck, strangling him, its large void-like eyes staring into his eyes as it sought to steal his life. In a later interview, Carl would describe the event like this: "While I was lying there, I suddenly woke up and something seemed wrong to me. I looked around the room, but nothing was out of place. But then I looked down towards my feet and I saw the rag doll, Annabelle. It was slowly gliding up my body. It moved over my chest and stopped. Then it put its 2 arms out. One arm touched one side of my neck and the other touched the other side, like it was making an electrical connection. Then I began to be strangled. I was writhing and trying to push the doll off my chest, but I might as well have been pushing on a wall because it wouldn't move as hard as he pushed against the doll. It would not budge. And just as he felt like he was slipping into unconsciousness, with every fiber of his being he pushed back and finally was able to throw the doll away from him. However, despite a tear-struck but relieved Carl, this would be far from the last time that Annabelle would seek to destroy. One night, when Deirdre was out of the apartment, Laura and Carl were spending time together in the living room. This relaxing time, however, was quickly interrupted with a large banging sound that emanated from Deirdre's room. The couple, confused as to what it could be, rushed to find the source, with Carl headed in first. They threw the door open, expecting to see someone, but to their surprise, they were only met with the icy gaze of Annabelle. She was staring at them from the floor as if she had been tossed aside by someone. Carl walked over to the door and went to pick it up, but suddenly he dropped in a bell and screamed in pain. The young man winced in agony as white-hot flashes lashed his chest. A small pool of blood began to form in the middle of his shirt as he frantically darted towards the door. Laura was paralyzed with fear as her boyfriend had been attacked by something that neither of them could see. The two would run out of the room and back to the living room as soon as possible, praying to God that this force wasn't pursuing them. When they reached the sofa, Laura pulled up Cal's blood-soaked shirt to find several large gashes on his chest that looked like claw marks. By now it was becoming increasingly clear that Annabelle sought to harm them. Upon informing Deirdre of what had happened while she was gone, when she arrived back at the apartment, the three, unsure of what else to do, contacted the local priest for help. He would in turn request permission to help from his superiors, and his superiors then passed on the information to paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were intrigued by what was allegedly taking place and decided to pursue the case in hopes of helping the young trio. Upon arriving at their apartment, hearing each person's testimonies and observing how the space felt as well as the doll itself, the Warrens believed the happenings to be a result of a heavy demonic infestation. They believed that the demon didn't specifically haunt just their apartment, but rather the building itself and the land around it, that it had seen the doll as a way in. They further explained that the seance had essentially allowed the demon to communicate directly with them, to be invited into their lives. All of those who were present in taking place in the ritual were highly vulnerable spiritually, and this opened them up to manipulation from the demon, which spun a false narrative that it was instead the spirit of little lonely Annabelle. Then, following the seance, Deirdre and Laura had paid credence to the doll instead of ignoring it, which only fed the demon more energy. It would then continue to feed off them by manipulating their caring and maternal emotions, since the women were powerless to resist feeling sorry for the little girl who just wanted to play and be cared for. But once the women had accepted the demon into their lives, they and everyone around them became fair game. The entity no longer had to masquerade itself. It was free to unleash its true form. The couple had sensed that the demon was a very powerful one, given how strong it had continued to grow and infest their lives. Given its proclivity to violence, if left unchecked, it would have probably tried to kill one or all of them within the next several weeks. After explaining the seriousness of the situation they found themselves in, the Warrens then contacted a priest they frequently worked with on demonic cases. A man named Father Everett, and Father Everett agreed to come and bless the apartment in an attempt to weaken or drive out the demon entirely. In due time, he too would arrive and conduct the blessing. Once Father Everett was finished and had departed, the Warrens warned the group that if the blessing hadn't driven the demon out, that it at this time was severely weakened but could potentially come back with a vengeance, believing the doll to be a conduit. At Deirdre's request, the Warrens took Annabelle with them when they left to Deirdre. Laura and Cal were now thankfully free of the demonic entity that had plagued their lives. However, Annabelle's story is far from over. The Warrens' problem seemed to begin as soon as Annabelle was stuffed into Ed's briefcase. As the couple was headed home, they began to experience engine issues in their vehicle, which almost resulted in multiple head-on collisions. The demonic entity was causing the power steering and brakes to fail, and even the engine to stall once they were able to finally get back home. The doll would be placed within the Warrens' office, specifically with an edge chair in the days to come. The Warrens would begin to witness the doll manifesting paranormal activity within their very house. The doll was seen levitating on several occasions and began to frequently teleport to different rooms, and the same little notes written with pencil on parchment paper began to appear with all too familiar phrases such as help,
me, and then now help us.
On top of this, one evening while she was alone, Lorraine began to hear what she described as loud rolling growls that reverberated within the walls and throughout their entire house. Following this night, the Warrens would be visited by Father Daniel Mills, the Catholic priest the couple were also working with. Upon inquiring about their dealings with the doll, the priest made the mistake of picking up Annabelle and telling her that you were nothing but a rag doll. And you can't hurt anything, as the priest laughed at, warned him to never touch or say anything like that to the doll ever again. As he prepared to leave, Lorraine warned the priest to please drive carefully, because her clairvoyance had revealed to her an impending tragedy involving a young priest. Appreciating her concern but writing this situation off, Father Mills departed the Warrens' residence a few hours later. He would be involved in that near-fatal car accident which totaled his vehicle after his car's brakes had mysteriously failed. Upon receiving the news that the priest was hurt but would survive following the accident, the Warrens decided to lock Annabelle away in hopes that she would never be able to hurt anyone ever again. They would douse her in holy water and place her within a blessed glass case. A blessed crucifix would also be placed on the outside of the box, as well as a warning sign asking anyone who may come across the doll not to touch it. The doll was then placed in their occult item collection. Although Annabelle was now sealed away in the hopes that she would no longer harm anyone, her power still seems to affect those who visit her after Ed passed away. Lorraine, in several interviews, would refer to Annabelle as one of the most evil objects she had ever come into contact with. Besides numerous bouts of bad luck, some people have even said to have encountered death as a result of meeting her, as well as others, losing their minds completely and ending up in psychiatric care for the rest of their earthly existence. One day, a young man visited the Warrens Museum and clearly did not think things through. He went up to and challenged the doll, wanting the worst of whatever it had to offer. He had apparently driven to the museum with his girlfriend on his motorcycle. Upon their departure 3 hours into their trip home, the man would lose control of his vehicle and would hit a tree at a very high speed. He would die almost instantly due to the impact. His girlfriend, on the other hand, survived, but would remain hospitalized for over a year. Was this particular instance coincidence or the demon inhabiting the doll, inflicting exactly what it had to offer? Although the Warrens did explain how the demon came into the doll, it begs a bit of a deeper question, one that we've seen reoccurring multiple times over our various coverage of haunted objects, and that is how much attention is too much attention or dedication when it comes to objects. It seems like depending on your spiritual state and location, that dedication or that empowerment could potentially open the door or create a vessel for something malicious to make its way in. I know that the Warrens are controversial figures now, even in death, but regardless, they are integral to many of the paranormal stories we have and will have covered in the future. But what do you think? Was Annabelle truly possessed? Was the whole case legitimate or a hoax? And with these questions, you may find yourself wondering, where is the Annabelle doll today? Annabelle remains sealed in the same box. She was placed in 50 years ago, added in. Lorraine's daughter, Judy Spiro, and her husband, Tony, continue to hold the torch for the Warrens and their work. Annabelle is on display for all to see at the Occult Museum, and if you choose to visit, if you happen to find yourself staring into her big dark eyes, just know that if you stare too long into the abyss just may stare back at you. Thank you guys so much for watching this new video. This topic in particular has been requested hundreds of times, so I hope I did all of those requests. Just as please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe with notifications on and share this video around. All those things helped me out a ton. That's why I ask you guys to do them all the time. I did also just want to announce here, and I will also be doing some separate promotional videos for something I've never done before, which is a meet and greet. So I will be a guest at the 2023 Tennessee Haunts and Legend Expo, which will take place on Saturday, October 21st at the Nashville Fairgrounds. There's going to be a ton of stuff to do and see and lots of scary stories and legends to learn about. So if you'd like the opportunity to meet me, I will have a booth there. I'll have some t-shirts, some cards, and probably some other stuff, and I'd be happy to chat with you guys. I'll also be joined by my co-host Hayden from the Missouri Archives podcast. So come out, have a great time, and see how boring I actually am. Other than that, guys, I hope you're all having a great October, and I wish you nothing but the absolute best. As always, this has been Cody here at Mystery R. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to stay safe out there and take care. It was 1970 when Donna, a bright young woman with dreams of becoming a nurse, was on the verge of graduating from college. Her life was on the cusp of change, but she had no idea that what awaited her was far more sinister than she could ever imagine. Donna's mother, with the best intentions, gifted her a Raggedy Ann doll for her birthday, a seemingly innocent gesture, a symbol of childhood innocence and nostalgia. It was a simple, vintage-looking doll, with a painted smile and button eyes. Yet little did Donna know this gift would soon shatter the peace in her home. At first, Donna was charmed by the doll. She placed it on her bed as a decoration, a sentimental piece in her adult life. The doll was a reminder of simpler times, a symbol of her childhood that would now sit proudly in her apartment. But within days of bringing it home, Donna began to notice small, peculiar things happening around the doll. It wasn't anything that would make her question reality at first, just subtle shifts. A slight movement of the doll's arm, a small tilt of the head. At first, she chalked it up to nothing more than gravity at work. After all, things like this could be explained away, right? But as days passed, these subtle shifts escalated. The doll wasn't just moving a little, it was moving rooms. Donna and her roommate Angie would leave the apartment and return to find the doll in a completely different location from where they had left it, sometimes in the living room, other times in the hallway. It wasn't just moving a few inches, but repositioning itself entirely, almost as if it were walking on its own. Once they came back to find it standing upright, stiff as a board, staring blankly into the void. And that wasn't all. The more they observed it, the more unsettling it became. There were times when they found the doll sitting cross-legged in a meditative pose, its hands folded delicately in its lap, as if waiting for someone to acknowledge it. But who would want to acknowledge such a thing? It felt wrong. The air grew thick with an eerie sense of discomfort as the doll's presence became more pronounced. Donna and Angie tried to laugh it off, but the atmosphere in the apartment felt increasingly heavy. Then, one day, things took a horrifying turn. It started with something far more disturbing than the movements. Donna and Angie began to find strange handwritten notes around their apartment. The notes were written in a child's handwriting, but the content was chilling. "Help us," they read over and over. The messages appeared randomly, sometimes on the kitchen counter, other times on the back of a book, and once even on a piece of toilet paper. The oddest part? Neither Donna nor Angie had written them. They didn't recognize the handwriting, and there was no explanation for where the paper had come from. It was as if the messages were being left by someone, or something, that was trying to communicate with them, but who or what. One night after returning home from work, Donna was greeted by an even more disturbing sight. The Raggedy Ann doll had somehow moved back onto her bed, but now something was different. Blood, dark, unsettling, and completely out of place, was dripping from the doll's hands and chest. It was as if the doll had been covered in it, and yet there was no visible source. There was no injury, no wound, and yet the blood was real, fresh, and it smeared onto the sheets, the floor, and the doll itself. Donna froze, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a doll shifting around. This was something far more sinister, something that could not be explained away. She tried to convince herself that she was just imagining things, but deep down, she knew this wasn't right. Whatever was happening in that apartment, it was beyond anything she could comprehend. Determined to understand what was going on, Donna reached out to a medium, a last-ditch effort to make sense of the horrors unfolding around her. The medium agreed to help, and they arranged a séance in the apartment, hoping to make contact with whatever spirit was haunting them. As the séance began, the room grew colder, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Then, through the medium, a voice began to speak, soft, ethereal, yet unmistakably clear. The voice identified itself as Annabelle Higgins, a young girl who had died on the land long before the apartments were built. Annabelle claimed that she had once lived on that property, a place where she had been happy in her childhood. But in the end, her life had been cut short when she passed away at the tender age of 7. The spirit went on to say that she was fond of Donna and Angie, and that she felt safe with them. Annabelle wanted to stay in the doll because it made her feel loved and wanted. Donna and Angie, moved by the spirit's story and desperate for an explanation, felt sympathy for the entity and gave it their blessing to stay. They felt as though they had made a compassionate choice, but this decision would mark the beginning of their nightmare. Little did they know, they were allowing something far darker into their lives. As days went by, the paranormal activity in the apartment escalated. It wasn't just moving anymore. Things started happening that were completely beyond the realm of reason. Objects were found out of place, doors slammed on their own, and strange noises echoed through the apartment at all hours of the night. The sense of dread was constant, thick and inescapable. And then one night, Donna's friend Lou, who had visited the apartment on many occasions, stayed over. Lou had always been uneasy around the doll, warning Donna and Angie that something was wrong with it. He didn't believe the doll was harmless, but they hadn't taken him seriously until that night. Lou woke from a terrifying dream, his body drenched in sweat, his heart racing. When he tried to move, he found himself completely paralyzed. His body refused to respond, and panic set in as he felt someone, watching him. Slowly, his eyes drifted to the corner of the room where the doll stood. It wasn't just sitting anymore. Annabelle was coming for him. The doll began to crawl across the floor, its porcelain face fixed in a haunting stare. It moved, inching up Lou's bed, and as he tried to scream, the doll reached its tiny, lifeless hands out and began to strangle him. Lou was unable to fight back, his chest tightening as the doll's fingers wrapped around his neck. In the terrifying moments that followed, Lou began to lose consciousness, slipping into darkness. By some miracle, Lou woke the next morning, his body trembling, his mind racing. The horrifying vision of the doll had not been a nightmare. It was real. The terror he had experienced had been as tangible as the wounds that remained on his skin. Lou could not deny the reality of what had happened, and in that moment, he was more certain than ever that this doll was not simply possessed by a child's spirit. It was something far more sinister. As Lou's fear grew, so did the disturbing events in the apartment. Despite his terrifying experience, Donna and Angie were still reluctant to fully accept the true nature of what they were dealing with. They believed, perhaps naively, that the spirit of Annabelle Higgins, a poor lost child, was harmless. But the truth was far darker than they could have imagined. The more the doll grew in power, the more its sinister grip tightened on the apartment. One evening, Donna and Angie were at home when they heard strange noises coming from Donna's bedroom. Lou, still shaken by his encounter with the doll, was with them at the time. When they entered the room, they were shocked by what they found. The doll, which had been peacefully sitting in the corner of the room, was now tossed into the middle of the floor, its body twisted in a strange, unnatural way. The sight of it filled Lou with a fresh wave of panic, and his warning came crashing back into Donna's mind. The doll was evil. It wasn't Annabelle Higgins, but something much darker. Lou quickly began to search the apartment, terrified that they might have an intruder. But as his eyes scanned the room, an overwhelming feeling of dread washed over him. He turned to face the doll, and for the briefest moment he felt as though something was standing just behind him. Whipping around, he found nothing, but the sensation of being watched was suffocating. Suddenly, a sharp burning pain sliced through his chest like claws raking across his skin. Lou doubled over, gasping in agony as he looked down to see blood soaking through his shirt. Panicking, Donna and Angie rushed to his side, trying to help. But Lou staggered back in disbelief as he realized that the gashes across his chest were not only hot to the touch, but deep. Too deep to have been caused by anything physical. They were almost like claw marks, fresh and bleeding heavily. But when Lou unbuttoned his shirt to examine the wounds more closely, he found that the cuts seemed to be healing before his eyes. Within 2 days, the gashes had disappeared completely, leaving no scars, no trace of injury. It was as if the wound had never existed. By now, it was impossible for Donna, Angie, and Lou to deny the terror that was unfolding around them. The doll wasn't just an inanimate object. It wasn't merely haunted. It was possessed, and it had a demonic force attached to it. This was no lost spirit of a little girl. This was a malevolent entity that had latched onto the doll, manipulating it and those around it for its own dark purpose. The presence of the doll had slowly but surely escalated into something far more dangerous. In their desperation, Donna and Angie contacted the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators known for their expertise in dealing with the most malevolent of spirits. The Warrens were no strangers to cases like this, but even they were taken aback by the strength of the spirit attached to Annabelle. They quickly realized that the doll was not haunted by the innocent soul of Annabelle Higgins, but by an inhuman spirit. Something far older, far darker, and far more dangerous. Ed and Lorraine Warren conducted a thorough investigation into the apartment, gathering as much information as they could. It became clear that the spirit had been manipulating Donna and Angie, creating an illusion of innocence to get closer to its ultimate goal: possession. The Warrens explained that the spirit had attached itself to the doll, using it as a vessel to gain entry into the real world and to eventually possess one of the women. If allowed to continue, the demon would have eventually taken full control of their bodies, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. The Warrens knew that they had to act quickly. The longer the doll stayed in the apartment, the greater the risk to Donna, Angie, and Lou. But removing the doll would not be as simple as taking it away. The demonic force was too powerful. As the Warrens prepared to move the doll, they began to experience supernatural phenomena of their own. On the way back to their house, the car that Ed and Lorraine were driving suddenly swerved violently, as if it was being controlled by an unseen force. The steering wheel jerked out of their control, and the brakes failed. The car careened down the road, and Ed and Lorraine found themselves helpless as the vehicle slid dangerously out of control. It was only when Ed reached into the back seat, grabbed a vial of holy water, and doused the doll with it while making the sign of the cross that the chaos finally stopped. The car regained control. The swerving ceased, and the eerie feeling that had gripped them finally loosened. The Warrens knew that they had to act fast before the spirit regained its strength. Once home, the Warrens took the doll into their collection of haunted artifacts, a secure, contained space in their occult museum. But even then, the spirit did not rest. A priest was called to bless the doll, but even he couldn't escape the doll's power. As he stood in front of the glass case looking at Annabelle, he scoffed at the doll's apparent harmlessness. "You're just a rag doll," he said. "You can't hurt anyone." Those words, spoken in defiance of the malevolent force inside the doll, would prove to be his undoing. Hours after the priest left the Warrens' house, he called them in a panic. His brakes had failed and his car careened uncontrollably into a busy intersection. The priest barely survived the crash and his car was totaled in the process. The events that followed were nothing short of a miracle, but they also served as a warning. Never underestimate the power of Annabelle. Despite its containment in the glass box, the doll's story did not end there. A chilling final chapter would unfold with a young couple who visited the Warrens' museum. They too mocked the doll, taunting it and daring it to harm them. The man, clearly dismissive of the doll's power, stood right up to the glass case, pounding on it and shouting at Annabelle to scratch him. He mocked the doll, daring it to show its power. Lorraine Warren, sensing the danger, immediately ordered the couple to leave, but their arrogance would soon be their undoing. As they left, laughing and mocking the doll, the man lost control of his motorcycle. The vehicle slammed into a tree at full speed, killing him instantly. His girlfriend, though surviving the crash, was hospitalized for nearly a year. When she was finally able to speak again, she admitted that it was their mockery of the doll that had caused the accident. The loss of control, the crash, the deadly consequences, all attributed to the malevolent spirit of Annabelle.